when a billionaire father watches a stranger hug his grieving daughter. He never imagined that simple act of kindness would change their lives forever. The man had everything people usually dream of. His name was Daniel, and he was known in business circles as a powerful billionaire. His pictures sometimes appeared in magazines, always dressed in tailored suits, standing in front of shiny cars, or giving speeches about success. Strangers thought his life was perfect. They imagined he never had to worry about anything at all. But anyone who saw him when he came home late at night would notice something most people never guessed. Behind the walls of his enormous mansion, beyond the expensive paintings and glittering lights, Daniel often sat in silence, staring at the floor. He was not only rich, he was also lonely. Years ago, he had fallen deeply in love with a woman who brought warmth into his life. Together, they had a daughter, Lily, who became the light of their world. But tragedy arrived without warning. His wife passed away when Lily was still very young. Since then, Daniel tried to be both father and mother for his little girl. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not replace the tenderness a child feels from a mother's arms. He bought her toys, hired the best tutors, filled her room with books, and even built her a garden with swings and flowers. Yet sometimes he found her sitting quietly, holding a doll and whispering as if she was talking to someone who wasn't there. Those were the moments that broke him the most. One Saturday, Daniel wanted to take Lily out for lunch. Usually, he chose fancy restaurants where waiters wore white gloves and music played softly in the background. But that day, Lily asked if they could go somewhere different. She said she wanted a place where normal people eat because she had seen it in one of her school books. Daniel hesitated at first. He wasn't used to small diners or simple places, but when he saw the hopeful look in his daughter's eyes, he agreed. After all, he wanted her to feel happy, even if it meant stepping outside of his comfort zone. They drove in his sleek black car through busy streets until Lily pointed at a small diner on the corner. Its neon sign flickered slightly, and the smell of fresh pies and coffee drifted out whenever someone opened the door. The place looked ordinary, even a little old, but cheerful. People inside were laughing, talking, and enjoying their meals without worrying about who was watching them. Daniel parked the car and followed Lily inside. The diner was nothing like the restaurants he knew. Instead of chandeliers, there were simple hanging lights. Instead of gold-rimmed plates, there were sturdy white dishes. The sound of laughter mixed with the clinking of forks. The atmosphere felt alive, not staged. Daniel noticed how Lily's eyes sparkled as she looked around. For once, she wasn't the billionaire's daughter. She was just a little girl sitting in a cozy place, excited to try something new. A waitress walked over with a friendly smile. Her uniform was neat but simple, her hair tied back. She handed them menus and greeted them warmly, not recognizing who Daniel was. That surprised him. Most places he went, people whispered his name or rushed to impress him. But here he was just another customer. It felt strangely refreshing. As they ordered, Lily began to chat happily with the waitress, asking about the milkshakes and which pie tasted the best. The waitress answered with patience, even kneeling a little to be at Lily's eye level. Daniel watched silently, noticing how gentle and natural she was with his daughter. Their food arrived, and they began to eat. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. But then, in the middle of her meal, Lily suddenly put down her fork and grew quiet. She looked at the families around her, the mother cutting pancakes for her child at the next table, the mom wiping her son's mouth with a napkin, the laughter shared between mothers and kids. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She turned to her father and whispered the words that always tore through his heart. "Daddy, where's Mommy? Why don't I have a mommy like the other kids?" Daniel froze. His chest tightened, and his throat felt heavy. He had answered that question before, in different ways, but each time it left him shaken. He tried to speak, but no words came out. How could he explain again, without breaking her tiny heart further? The waitress, who had been walking by with a tray, stopped when she heard Lily's trembling voice. She set the tray down quickly on another table and came over without hesitation. Kneeling beside Lily, she gently placed a hand on the little girl's shoulder. Lily looked up at her, tears streaming down her cheeks. Without saying anything at first, The waitress opened her arms. Nellie leaned into her for a hug. It was not just a polite hug. It was warm, soft, and full of comfort. The kind of hug a mother gives without needing to be asked. Lily's sobs quieted as she buried her face against the waitress's shoulder. The woman stroked her hair and whispered softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. You are such a strong, beautiful girl. Don't cry." Daniel sat completely still, watching the scene unfold. He felt a rush of emotions he hadn't expected. This was a stranger, someone who didn't owe his daughter anything, yet she gave her comfort with a tenderness that touched him deeply. He realized that in all his wealth and power, he could buy toys, houses, even entire companies, but he could never buy this. The simple, genuine love of a kind human heart. For a few minutes, time seemed to pause. The chatter in the diner faded into the background. All Daniel saw was his daughter clinging to the waitress as if she had found something she had been missing for so long. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt his eyes grow wet. He quickly blinked, not wanting anyone to notice. But inside, something shifted. He felt both pain and relief, the pain of realizing how much his daughter missed her mother, and the relief of knowing that kindness still existed in the world, even from strangers. When Lily finally pulled back, the waitress wiped her little tears with a napkin and gave her a smile. "You are very brave," she said, "and you have a daddy who loves you very much." Lily nodded, holding her father's hand, and gave a small smile through her damp lashes. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice husky, and whispered a thank you to the waitress. She simply nodded, as if what she had done was nothing special. But for him it was unforgettable. As they left the diner later, Lily held her father's hand tightly and looked happier, calmer. Daniel kept thinking about the moment he had witnessed. A woman he had never met before had shown his daughter a kind of warmth he hadn't been able to give. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt something stirring inside him, a mix of gratitude, curiosity, and a quiet hope he didn't dare name yet. The next day after their visit to the diner, Daniel found himself thinking about what had happened more often than he expected. He had been in countless business meetings, closed deals worth billions, and sat with world leaders, yet none of those moments stayed in his heart the way that single hug did. Every time he looked at Lily, he remembered the way she had pressed her face into the waitress's shoulder. Finding comfort that even he couldn't give, Daniel was not the type of man to dwell on strangers. He was practical, always moving forward, always planning. But this time was different. Something about that small diner, about that woman's kindness, refused to leave his mind. A few days later, while he was working in his office at home, Lily came in with her favorite doll. She sat beside him quietly, watching him type on his laptop. After a long silence, she asked softly, "Daddy, can we go back to that place again? The one with the milkshakes?" Daniel stopped typing. He turned to her, studying her innocent face. He knew exactly what she meant. The diner. The place where she had cried, and where that stranger had held her so gently. He hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Of course, sweetheart. We can go tomorrow." The following afternoon, they drove back to the diner. This time, Daniel didn't feel so out of place when he stepped inside. He even noticed details he had ignored before: the cheerful jukebox in the corner, the smell of butter sizzling on the grill, the waitress laughing with an older couple at another table. Lily's face lit up as soon as she spotted her. The waitress came over, just as warm as before, and greeted Lily with a smile. "Back again so soon? Did the milkshake pass the test?" she teased gently. Lily giggled and nodded. Daniel watched his daughter laugh. Something inside him softened again. From that day on, the diner became a regular stop. Once a week turned into twice, and sometimes even more. Daniel told himself it was only for Lily, but deep down he knew there was another reason. He wanted to see the waitress again. Her name was Emma. He learned it one evening when she introduced herself after realizing they were going to keep coming back. She was different from the people Daniel usually met. She didn't care about money, or fame, or reputation. When she looked at him, she didn't see the billionaire on magazine covers. She just saw a man with his little girl, Emma. It's always made time for Lily, even on busy days when the diner was full and she was rushing from table to table. She never failed to kneel down, ask Lily about school, or draw a smiley face with whipped cream on her pancake. Daniel noticed how his daughter's eyes sparkled whenever Emma was around. She had been more cheerful at home, too, humming to herself while playing, asking about when they could go back again. It was like she had found a new kind of joy, one that Daniel's money had never been able to buy. For Daniel, these visits felt strange but refreshing. He wasn't used to simple conversations about everyday things. Emma often talked about the weather, or about a funny thing another customer said, or about how hard it was to keep her shoes from wearing out because she worked on her feet all day. Daniel found himself listening closely, even to things he normally would have considered unimportant. In fact, he looked forward to them. Sometimes he caught himself staring when she walked by, not in a way he was proud of, but in quiet curiosity. Who was she, really? What kind of life did she go home to after the diner closed? He knew she was kind, that she cared for people naturally, but he wondered what burden she carried behind her smile. One evening, after finishing their meal, Lily asked Emma if she could draw something on a napkin for her. Emma took a pen from her apron and quickly sketched a simple flower with a smiley face in the middle. Lily clapped her hands in delight, then handed it to her father. "See, Daddy? Isn't it pretty?" Daniel nodded, but his eyes lingered on Emma as she laughed softly. At home later, Daniel placed the napkin carefully in a drawer of his desk, surprising even himself. It was just a napkin, just a doodle. But somehow it meant more. The more time they spent at the diner, the more Daniel realized how much Emma reminded him of something he had lost. Not his wife exactly, no one could replace her, but the warmth of everyday kindness. It's the type that didn't need luxury or wealth to exist. He remembered how his wife used to laugh freely at little things, how she always knelt to Lily's level when speaking to her. Emma had that same effortless grace. Lily, on the other hand, was growing more attached by the day. Sometimes she mentioned Emma at home, asking, "Do you think Emma would like my drawing? Or can we bring her flowers next time?" Daniel saw how his daughter's heart was slowly filling with a comfort she hadn't had since her mother's passing. But he also felt a strange fear creeping in. What if they stopped going to the diner? What if Emma wasn't there one day? His daughter would be crushed, and him. He wasn't sure how he would feel, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. Still, he didn't stop the visits. Each time he told himself he was just doing it for Lily. But as the weeks passed, even he couldn't deny the truth he wanted to be there. 2.1 afternoon, after finishing their meal, Daniel paid at the counter where Emma was ringing up orders. He glanced around, noticed Lily busy tying her shoelaces, and lowered his voice. "Thank you," he said quietly. Emma looked puzzled. "For what?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then said, "For being so kind to my daughter. It means more than you know." Emma smiled. Not the kind of polite smile she gave customers, but a genuine one. "She's a wonderful little girl. It's easy to care about her." That simple answer left Daniel thoughtful all the way home. She hadn't mentioned him, hadn't tried to flatter or impress. It was all about Lily. That was rare in his world, where people often tried to get close to him for their own gain. At bedtime, as Daniel tucked Lily in, she hugged him tightly and whispered, "Daddy, I like Emma. She makes me feel happy." Daniel kissed her forehead and said softly, "I know, sweetheart. Me too." Lying awake later, Daniel admitted something to himself for the first time. He wasn't just visiting the diner for his daughter anymore. He was going because he wanted to feel that same happiness, that same simplicity, even if just for an hour at a time. Over the next few weeks, the diner became more than just a place to eat. For Lily, it was where she felt safe and happy. For Daniel, it became a place where his guarded world slowly began to crack open. Each visit was different, but one thing stayed the same. Emma always greeted them with the same kindness. The same warm smile that seemed to reach right into the quiet corners of his heart. It started with small conversations. At first, they spoke about ordinary things. Daniel was surprised at how much Emma laughed, even when she was tired. She told little stories about the funny things customers did, or how a pie had collapsed in the oven, and she had to quickly hide it before anyone noticed. Daniel found himself smiling, sometimes even chuckling, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in a long time. One afternoon, while Lily was coloring on a paper placemat, Emma leaned against their booth for a moment. She asked Daniel, "Does she like drawing a lot?" Daniel nodded. "She loves it. She could spend hours drawing flowers and houses." "That's sweet. When I was her age, I used to draw too, but mostly on the backs of receipts because we didn't have much paper at home." Her words caught Daniel off guard. He was used to people bragging about their childhoods, or their degrees, or their achievements. Emma spoke with no pride, no shame, just honesty. For some reason, that honesty stayed with him long after they left the diner. The more time they spent there, the more Daniel noticed little details about Emma. She always made sure her coworkers had breaks before she did. She never rushed Lily when she asked a question, even when the diner was busy. Sometimes, when Emma thought no one was watching, Daniel saw her rub her wrist as if it ached from carrying trays all day. He began to realize that behind her cheerful smile, she carried struggles she never spoke about. One rainy evening, the diner was quieter than usual. Daniel and Lily sat near the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Emma came by with their food and sat for a minute since her shift was almost over. Lily, in her innocent way, asked, "Emma, do you have kids too?" Daniel immediately felt a knot in his stomach, afraid that the question might be too personal. But Emma just gave a soft smile and shook her head. "No, sweetheart, I don't. But I help take care of my little brother. He's younger than you, but he's had a hard time because he's sick a lot. So I guess you could say I'm a bit like a second mom to him." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? You're like his mommy?" Emma laughed gently. "Something like that." Daniel listened quietly. He had not known this part of her life. A small part of him wanted to ask more, but he held back. Still, her words stayed with him. He admired how she spoke so gently about her challenges, without bitterness. She wasn't someone who complained, even when life wasn't fair. After that evening, Daniel found himself thinking more about Emma when he wasn't at the diner. It bothered him a little because he wasn't used to such thoughts. His life had always been about work, schedules, and making sure Lily had everything she needed. He had never allowed space for anything or anyone else. Yet, when he closed his eyes at night, he sometimes pictured Emma's laugh or the way she knelt down to speak with Lily. One Saturday afternoon, Lily brought home a drawing she had made at school. It showed 3 people holding hands, a little girl, a tall man, and a woman with long hair. She ran up to her father and proudly showed it to him. "Look, Daddy. That's me, that's you, and that's Emma." Daniel froze for a moment, staring at the picture, his heart squeezed. He didn't know whether to smile or to feel scared. Lily looked up at him, waiting for his reaction. He forced a smile and kissed her forehead. "It's very beautiful," he said softly, but inside, he was shaken. His daughter already saw Emma as part of their little family. The next time they visited the diner, Daniel couldn't help but watch more closely. He noticed how naturally Emma and Lily interacted, as though they had known each other for years. Emma tied Lily's shoelace when it came undone, shared a bite of pie when Lily insisted, and even wiped a bit of chocolate from her cheek. Daniel felt a strange warmth watching them together, but also a deep fear. Was he letting his daughter get too attached? Was he getting too attached himself? Later that evening, when they were leaving, Daniel finally spoke to Emma more personally. While Lily ran ahead to look at the pies in the display case, Daniel said quietly, "You're very good with her. She hasn't been this happy in a long time." Emma glanced at him, her expression soft. "She's a sweet girl. She deserves to be happy." Her words were simple, but Daniel felt them deeply. He wanted to tell her about the nights when Lily cried herself to sleep, or about how powerless he sometimes felt as a father. But he didn't. Instead, he just nodded, his throat tight that night. When Daniel was lying in bed, he admitted something to himself he had been avoiding. He cared about Emma, not just for what she did for Lily, but for who she was. Her kindness, her strength, her way of making the simplest moments feel important. It was something he hadn't felt since before his wife passed away, but along with that realization came fear. He was a billionaire, and she was a waitress. Their worlds could not have been more different. What if he scared her away? What if people thought she was only interested in him because of his money? And what if opening his heart again only led to more pain? Yet, every time he thought of stepping back, he remembered the way Lily smiled whenever Emma was around. He remembered the quiet peace he felt sitting in that diner, something no boardroom or mansion had ever given him. And he knew deep inside that he couldn't simply walk away. The bond between them was growing, even if none of them had said it aloud yet. And though Daniel didn't know what the future held, one thing was clear. I'd already touched their lives in a way that would never fade. As the weeks passed, Daniel and Lily's visits to the diner continued, but something shifted quietly in the background. What had started as casual meals was now a part of their lives. They were no longer just customers. Emma was no longer just a waitress. She had become someone important to both of them, even if no one had said it out loud. But life has a way of testing bonds, and soon Daniel discovered that Emma's kindness was not free of struggles. One late evening, after a busy day at work, he decided to stop by the diner alone. He thought of surprising Lily the next day by bringing her favorite pie home. When he walked inside, the place was quieter than usual. Most of the tables were empty, and Emma stood near the counter, speaking in a low voice with the manager. Daniel noticed the way her shoulders slumped and how her voice trembled slightly. Even though he couldn't hear all the words, the manager patted her shoulder awkwardly and walked away. Leaving Emma wiping at her eyes quickly before forcing on a smile, she turned and spotted Daniel. Her surprise was clear. "Oh, you're here. I didn't expect." Her voice trailed off. Daniel hesitated, then asked gently, "Are you all right?" Emma quickly nodded. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a long day." She tried to brush it off. Dodge. But Daniel had seen enough in business to recognize when someone was carrying more than they wanted to show. Still, he respected her silence and didn't press. He ordered the pie, thanked her, and left. But the image of her wiping her eyes followed him home like a shadow. The next time they visited with Lily, Daniel tried to pay closer attention. He noticed the way Emma seemed a little more tired, how her smile faltered when she thought no one was looking. When Lily asked her about her brother, Emma's eyes softened, but Daniel could see the weight behind them. One evening as they were leaving the diner, Emma walked them to the door. Lily ran ahead to the car, skipping happily, leaving Daniel and Emma behind for a brief moment. He lowered his voice. "Emma, if you ever need help, you can tell me. I mean that." She looked at him with surprise. Then a hint of pride flashed in her eyes. "Thank you, but I don't want to be someone else's problem. I've managed this long on my own." Daniel admired her strength, but he also felt frustrated. He wasn't used to people refusing his help. He had spent his whole life solving problems with money, fixing things with resources. Yet, with Emma, he realized it wasn't so simple. A week later, the situation revealed itself without warning. Daniel and Lily arrived at the diner, only to find Emma not there. Another waitress explained quietly that Emma had to stay home because her younger brother was very sick. They didn't know when she'd be back. Lily's face fell, disappointment heavy in her eyes. "Can we go see her, Daddy? Please?" she begged. Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to invade Emma's personal space, but the thought of her struggling alone with no support gnawed at him. That night, after putting Lily to bed, he made a few discreet phone calls. Using his resources, he found out that Emma's brother had been in and out of hospitals for months and that medical bills had piled up. She had been working double shifts just to keep up. Daniel sat in his office long into the night, staring at the information. His heart ached. Here was a woman who gave kindness so freely, yet carried such heavy burdens herself. He wanted to step in immediately, to pay every bill, to lift every weight from her shoulders. But he remembered her words, "I don't want to be someone else's problem." The next day, instead of writing a check, Daniel did something else. He arranged for one of the best doctors he knew, an old friend, who owed him a favor, to quietly review the brother's case. The doctor agreed to help without payment simply because Daniel asked. That way, Emma wouldn't feel as though she had been given charity. She would see it as a connection, not a handout. When Emma returned to the diner a week later, she looked more tired than ever. But when she saw Daniel and Lily waiting at their usual booth, her face brightened, if only for a moment. Lily ran to her and hugged her tightly. "I missed you," she exclaimed. Emma laughed softly, hugging her back, though Daniel could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Later that evening, when the diner grew quieter, Daniel finally spoke. "I heard about your brother," he said gently. Emma stiffened, but didn't deny it. "He's sick," she admitted quietly. "It's been hard, but we'll manage." Daniel nodded slowly. "I might know someone who can help. A doctor who's very good. I can introduce you if you'd like." Emma looked at him carefully, searching his face. She seemed ready to refuse, pride tugging at her. But then her shoulders slumped. For the first time, she let out a shaky breath. "If it's just an introduction, I suppose that would be all right." That small acceptance felt like a victory. Not because Daniel had used his wealth or power, but because Emma trusted him enough to let him step into her world. From that moment, something shifted between them. Emma no longer saw Daniel as just a customer, and Daniel no longer saw her as just a kind waitress. They had crossed a quiet line into something deeper, a space where trust was being built. Slowly but surely, one evening, soon after, Lily, in her innocent way, asked the question Daniel had been dreading. They were sitting in the booth eating fries when Lily suddenly looked up at Emma and asked, "Can you be my mommy?" The words hung in the air like a delicate thread. Daniel froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Emma's eyes widened, and she looked at Lily with a mix of shock and tenderness. She reached across the table, taking Lily's hand gently. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "you already have a mommy. She's in your heart, and she always will be. I'm just your friend." Lily nodded slowly, but Daniel could see the hope in her eyes. He felt a lump in his throat, realizing how deeply his daughter longed for that missing piece in her life. After they left the diner that night, Daniel lay awake thinking. His daughter's question echoed in his mind. Could Emma truly be part of their lives in that way? Could he open his heart again after all these years? The idea terrified him, yet it also stirred something he hadn't felt in a long time, possibility, for the first time since his wife's passing. Daniel began to imagine a future that wasn't built on loneliness. And though he didn't have all the answers, he knew one thing clearly: Emma had become far more than just a kind stranger in a diner. She was now a part of their story. Time passed, and Daniel, Lily, and Emma had grown closer, though nothing had been forced. Their bond had developed quietly, naturally, as moments of laughter, care, and understanding filled the spaces between them. Daniel had learned to watch and listen, to step back and let Lily and Emma create their own connections, while he observed, sometimes amazed at how effortless it all seemed. One sunny afternoon, Daniel took Lily to the diner without telling Emma. He wanted it to be a surprise, something to break the monotony of her long workdays. As they walked in, Lily ran ahead, calling out, "Emma, guess what we brought?" Emma looked up from the counter and froze for just a second. Then her face broke into that warm smile Daniel had come to love. Lily jumped into her arms immediately, hugging her tightly. Daniel watched quietly from the doorway, his heart swelling with emotion. The waitress, once a stranger, now held a central place in their little family, even if they hadn't yet spoken the words aloud that would define it. After Lily had calmed down, they sat at their usual booth, and Emma joined them in conversation as naturally as if she had always been part of their lives. Daniel felt a quiet gratitude. He realized that for months, he had been chasing control in every part of his life's business deals. Finances, schedules, but here, in this little diner, life had found its own balance. No contracts, no rules, just care and love that didn't need explanations or proof. Over the next few weeks, Daniel began to notice subtle changes in himself. He laughed more freely, sometimes even joining in the playful teasing between Lily and Emma. He stopped checking his phone constantly during meals. He listened to Emma's stories, asking questions not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to understand her life. And slowly he felt the walls he had built around his heart start to crumble. One evening, after the diner closed and the lights dimmed, Daniel waited outside as Emma walked to her car. The streets were quiet, and rain had left a thin mist hanging in the air. He took a deep breath and spoke before he could overthink it. "Emma, I want to thank you. For everything. For Lily, for me, for being who you are." Emma paused, glancing at him with that honest, unwavering look he had grown to admire. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "I just care. That's all." Daniel shook his head slightly, a small smile on his lips. "No, I do need to thank you. I've realized something. All this time I thought I could handle everything alone. But you've shown me that it's okay to let someone in. That family isn't just blood. It's people who care. People who choose each other." Emma looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, a small, almost shy smile forming. I'm glad, Daniel, truly." For Daniel, that moment was a turning point. He had spent so long hiding behind wealth, behind routines, behind the belief that he could protect his daughter with money alone. But he had learned that love, compassion, and trust were far more important than anything money could buy. Lily, of course, was the heart of it all. She had watched the quiet bond growing between her father and Emma without fully understanding it, yet she sensed the warmth and safety that surrounded her. One afternoon, as they were leaving the diner, Lily tugged at Emma's hand. "You're my favorite person," she said simply, her voice full of innocent conviction. Emma laughed softly and hugged her again. Daniel watched them, a lump in his throat. For the first time in years, he felt complete not because of possessions or status, but because of the people around him. The kind waitress, the little girl who had changed his life. The small moments of care and connection had created something richer than anything money could provide. Life continued, slowly but steadily. Emma's presence in their lives became more than a weekly visit. She celebrated birthdays with them, helped Lily with school projects, and even joined Daniel on occasional weekend trips, not as a guest, but as someone truly part of the family. And though Daniel never pressured or rushed her, he found himself imagining a future where Emma was always there, where her laughter and warmth were constants in their home. One night, Daniel and Emma stayed behind after Lily had gone to bed. The diner was empty, the neon lights glowing softly outside the windows. Daniel felt a quiet courage he hadn't known he possessed. He looked at Emma, taking a deep breath. "Emma, I know we come from different worlds, and I don't want to make things complicated, but I care about you. More than I ever thought I could care about anyone again." Emma's eyes softened, and she took a small step closer. "Daniel, I care too. I have for a while, I think. But I was afraid it would never work, because, well, life is complicated, and you have so much, and I've always had to be careful." Daniel smiled gently. "I don't care about money. I don't care about status. All I care about is U.S. Lily, you and me. I want to build a life where we're together, however that looks. I just want a chance." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She stepped forward and embraced him. A hug full of relief, hope, and something that had been growing silently for months. For Daniel, it was as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted. He felt lighter, freer, happier than he had in years. The following day, Lily ran into the diner, excited as always. "Emma, Daddy said you can come over for dinner tonight." Emma laughed, kneeling to hug her. "That sounds wonderful, Lily." Daniel watched quietly, his heart full. He realized that this simple scene, a little girl, her father, and the woman they both loved was the life he had been missing all along, in the weeks that followed. Daniel found joy in the small moments, cooking breakfast with Lily while Emma joined them, reading bedtime stories together, sharing quiet evenings on the couch, laughing at silly jokes. It was nothing extravagant, no gala or fancy event, just a family. And that was everything. Daniel knew there would be challenges ahead. Life had never been easy for Emma, and being part of his world would bring its own pressures. But he also knew that they could face anything together. Money and status had never brought him true happiness, but love, trust, and the people who chose to stay that did. One evening, Daniel watched Lily run into Emma's arms at the park, the sun setting behind them. She laughed freely, the kind of laughter that warmed the heart. Emma held her tightly, and Daniel felt a quiet peace. He realized then that this love, this family, this life was worth more than anything he had ever achieved. He walked toward them slowly, smiling. As Lily turned and waved at him, Daniel knew that their future, though uncertain, was bright. They had found each other in the most unexpected way, and together they had discovered the greatest wealth of all: love, trust, and the joy of being together. And as they all walked home that evening, side by side, Daniel understood finally that happiness wasn't about what he owned or controlled. It was about opening his heart, letting others in, and cherishing the simple moments that became extraordinary because they were shared with the people who truly mattered.